Hello, biology students! Today we're going to talk about Animalia, animals, you and me. So when we talk about animals, we're not just talking about you and me. We're talking about a really diverse group, all the way from jellyfish to you and me. And all of us, those things, are eukaryotes, meaning we have a nucleus. And we're all multicellular, meaning we have lots of cells. We're all heterotrophs, meaning all of those things consume other things for energy. And it's important to understand that animals evolved from very simple animal-like protists. Protists, we learned, are single-celled, mostly eukaryotes. Some are asexual, meaning they make clones of themselves in some way or another, and we learned about that in our asexual and sexual notes. But most animals reproduce sexually. Lastly, some are non-moving, also known as non-modal, but most of these things are moving organisms. Now we're going to learn about a couple other details as well as some major categories. So one of the major categories of animals is the category called invertebrates. Let's break this down. In means not, and vertebrate meaning backbone. So here we're talking about no backbone organisms. In your chart, what I'd like you to do is make sure you jot down the examples. So, for instance, the first category is called peripora. All right, I'm going to be butchering how these are pronounced, but it's okay because it doesn't really matter. The example of this type of organism is a sponge. And yes, sponges, like SpongeBob's supposed to represent, they don't look like him. This guy's a sponge, are animals. Even though they're super simple, they're non-moving and they eat things like plankton. Cnidaria, right, that C is kind of silent. Those are stinging animals like jellyfish. Platyhelminths, yep, that one's a hard one, are things like flatworms, tapeworms, and those things tend to be very often parasites. Same thing with nematodes. Nematodes are roundworms, ooh, parasites. Annelida are things that are segmented worms. These are more of our more frequent or common worms that we see on the ground and might use for fishing or that birds like to eat. Mollusca, or mollusks, are a lot of these things that have shells, such as a snail. If you were to take upperclassmen biology, you would learn about each of these categories in general and why those things have to be different categories. Arthropoda, or poda, or arthropods, are jointed-legged animals. These are insects, things from grasshopper to beetles. Most insects are considered this category. Our next category is echinoderms, and this one is having us say it as echinodermata, right? I like this category because they include sea stars and urchins. So cool, all right? And this is one of our types that can definitely reproduce asexually, because if you cut off a part of a sea star, it should grow back, right? And that's our asexual reproduction. The other type of category, not backbone, must then have a category called backbones, and that's called vertebrates. Vertebrates have a endoskeleton, meaning a skeleton inside them. We are vertebrates. We have backbones, and our skeleton definitely exists on our insides, unlike a skeleton of an insect that's on its outsides. And other things that are pretty common for vertebrates, we have complete digestive systems, circulatory systems, respiratory or breathing systems, reproductive systems, and skeletal systems. All right. Now, for these vertebrates, we usually categorize them in two major types of categories on how they regulate their body temperature. So we talked way back at the beginning of the year of the thing called homeostasis, maintaining internal balance, which one example is maintaining temperature balance. But organisms do this in different ways. So ectotherms, right, are cold-blooded organisms. They cannot internally regulate their own body temperature, so they regulate their body temperature based on their environment. So for instance, a lizard is one example of this. A lizard, if it's having trouble being too hot or too cold, it needs to move into an environment that will help it maintain internal balance. And so if it's too hot, it would move out of the sunlight. If it's too cold, it would be in the sunlight. This is compared to the category we fall under, endotherms, and we are warm-blooded, meaning we have the ability to maintain our own internal body temperature, and we keep it constant on our own. We do that through, if it's too hot, we sweat. If it's too cold, we shiver. So 2 major categories. When we look at some example organisms, we're going to categorize them as one or the other. So here's a variety of vertebrates. They are not all the example categories, they are just some. So for instance, ectotherms, things that are cold-blooded, for instance, could be like fishes and sharks. Those things, they do not have an internal ability to maintain their own body temperature, and so they do that through using the environment to regulate their body temperature. Similarly, amphibians do the same thing, like our frogs and salamander here. Then we have an example of an endotherm or warm-blooded creature, like a bird. And then we have the category we fall under, mammals. So lots of different types of things that have backbones. All of these things also have those complete digestive and circulatory systems. They're a lot more complex usually than a lot of the invertebrates. In class, if there's time, we will look at some more examples, but given that it's close to the end of the year, we will decide how many examples we will go over in class and make sure that we're reviewing for things like the SOL on the final exam. Great job, guys. See you then.